Hey, it's Dren here again with another Ghost Notes, and this is another one in my series of quick mix tips, shorter little videos that have some real specific little examples that I'm coming up with. As I mentioned in another video, I have taught at both UC Santa Cruz and the Games and Playable Media Department, and at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music for a few years, where I taught game audio and mixing, especially mixing virtual instrument mixes and sound design, things like that. So this all kind of comes from a lot of problems that my former students had been running into in their mixes, especially trying to mix orchestral music or hybrid orchestral music and using virtual instruments, specifically soft synths in this little episode. If you are working on a mix, it's sort of a hybrid of orchestral and say synth type of stuff, and you're using soft synths, I think this tip might benefit you and getting a handle on your low end of the synth if you're relying on that for your low end. So without further ado, let's get into it. So what I have here is a little line from a soft synth. This one is from Trillian by Spectrasonics. Now, I'm not picking on Trillian or Spectrasonics at all. I love their instruments. But sometimes what I would run across in my classes is we'd have students use 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 of these big instruments that are filling up lots of space in their mix, and they didn't know why their mix didn't work, why it wasn't coming together. And a lot of that was because they were using these big synth patches that just took up a lot of room. So here's an example. So this is one of their presets. I think it's called El Barrio. So here it is. So it's a cool sound. I can see a lot of students going, yeah, I love that little groove. This will be perfect for my class project, whatever it is. Pick this one because it's got a lot of low end and it's got a lot of high end frequency material happening in it. And that gets hard to manage when you go to your mix. So if someone really wanted to use this patch and then they were going to, say, add some strings on top of it or some brass or something like that, I would suggest splitting that file up. So in this example, I've taken this, I've used Logic's feature to bounce in place. I've already done it, so I don't need to do it. But all you do is select the MIDI region, you select bounce in place, and it creates this region for you. Now it's an audio region. Now on this side, I'll turn off the EQ, and you can just hear this is the same thing. And then before I did anything with it, I copied it to a new track and called the new track low end. And now let's just hear the high end. I've named it high end. So what I'm trying to do is split this patch up between the high frequency information and the low frequency information. And then hopefully we can deal with it a little bit differently in the mix. So this is the first step I would go about in doing that. So here you can see my EQ. I just use simple channel EQ in Logic. And you can see I've cut all of this back. So if we look at the actual audio, you can see this is what's happening here. If I turn this off, turn it back on, I can turn this off. You can see how much information is up here. But I only want to deal with a high frequency information. So I've just got everything basically above 200 coming through. And I might want to handle that high frequency information a little bit differently in my mix than my low end information. So here's the same thing, doing just the opposite, where I've gone through and just focused on this group of frequencies for the low end. I could even, add a little bit, put a little bump around here. But now I know that that track is that low end and it's focused on these frequencies. If I play them together, you'll hear the whole thing. And that shouldn't sound too differently than the original patch. So there you have it. They're split up now. Now the next thing I would do is I would take this track that is my low end. And I would go over here and I would make that a mono track. Right now it's stereo because when it bounced out of Trillian was in stereo. You don't have any other choice. I think Trillian only comes in either stereo or multi-output, right? So I would take my low end side. I would go to this little, if you can see where I'm pointing my mouse here, and I make that mono. So now it's mono, but one more thing, the EQ, when I instantiated it, was stereo. So that's still going to say stereo, and we got to change that to mono. So let's make that mono. You're not going to hear a huge difference, but for me, it becomes a lot easier to deal with in the mix if I know that that low end is going to be mono. And I just kind of treat all of the frequency information in a mix that's, say, below 150 or something like that. It's mostly mono, certainly under 100. I try to keep on my bass, my kick drum, my snare drum, and my vocals mostly just in the center channel in mono. Now that could change for vocals. That's not always the case. It'd probably be center if it's the lead vocal, probably be mono, but if there are background vocals, that could change. Not a hard and fast rule, but a generalization that I think is really good for when you're learning how to mix. I think it's a good rule of thumb to take your low end, make it mono, make it easier to manage. So now we've just got these. Well, if I take this out, we just got these two things. And with a high end, maybe I want to do something funky with that high end. Maybe I want to, I don't know, run it through some kind of, here, let me run it through a delay. That might be neat. So let's go to something like Timeless. We'll keep that in stereo, and we'll do some kind of ping-pongy thing or something. Maybe ping pong. Let's see how that sounds. We'll just hear this part. So now I have that high information, and I can do this ping-pongy stereo effect. Maybe I want to make it even more wide. So I could go to something like shred spread. For just kind of widening the signal, you can go to, say, something like this wide double acoustic guitars and even just really spread it past that. So now we really got that thing going back and forth and wide, and now we can add in our low end. And we compare that to our original. And not only does it, I think, start to sound better, but you couldn't add that delay and the wideness, the width, to that whole sound. If I had done that to the MIDI region here, it wouldn't have been easy to deal with in the mix. Now it's a little easier to deal with. So that kind of makes your life a bit easier. And when you're mixing, especially when you get a lot of tracks involved, the easier you can make your life, the happier you usually are. So that's this little trick. Okay, so that's that trick, the little splitting of the soft synth sound to give us some low end and some high end, and split it out and deal with it in our mix that way. Hope you found that helpful, and I guess I'll see you on the next mix tips here at the Ghost Notes videos. Thanks.